Zelda episodes in 1 year? Who the hell decided that was a good idea?
Zelda. Oh, right. We just did Ocarina of Time and I missed it. Hi, everyone.
Ohio,
paisanos.
Well, everyone, hello and welcome to episode 36 of Superannuated Starman. You heard it already, folks. We're covering yet another Zelda game. We've already covered Ocarina of Time. Unfortunately, Cory wasn't there for that one, but I did have with me Chris Duerksen. Chris, I hope that you're doing well.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Wow. Okay. Whatever that was, I'm glad to hear.
How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic, man. I've been busy, and for everybody out there, I'm sorry that we weren't able to get this episode out sooner. It's October, so hopefully that means that the world is going to kind of slow down just a little bit.
When did they get Ronald? That was like the 14th, wasn't it? That's when you released it, or the 10th or something?
I can't remember exactly because we recorded it about a week before.
Yeah,
released.
But I mean, they got it on it's only been like 2.5 weeks for them. They're fine. They're okay.
Well, it feels like forever. So if you were waiting on an episode, I'm sorry. I haven't really received much of anything. No, like Twitter or emails, and our Discord. Guys, our Discord is quiet. We want to hear from you.
It's
so
weird.
As far as introductions go, you're hearing Cory. That's him.
Ohio Paisano.
And I am Sean Ryan. I'm going to be your host for the episode, and we will be covering The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening for the Game Boy Color, and the Switch. I still haven't decided if I'm going to use the Game Boy music or the orchestrated Switch soundtrack, but on that note, Link's Awakening has some amazing music, so enjoy it. And when we come back, I'm going to cover the fascinating history of this game. First released on the original Game Boy, Link's Awakening was developed by Nintendo EAD and, of course, published by Nintendo themselves. Link's Awakening hit Japanese stores on June 6th of 1993, 2 months later on August 6th in North America, and in Europe on December 1st. Before development officially began, programmer Kazuaki Morita designed a Zelda-like prototype using the Game Boy development kit, mostly to experiment with the platform's capabilities. This caught the attention of other members from the Nintendo Entertainment Analysis and Development Division, aka EAD, and they joined in on this unsanctioned after-hours project. Takashi Tezuka went to his superiors and asked to start development on the handheld Zelda title that he originally intended to be a port of the 1991 SNES game, The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past, known as the Triforces of the Gods in Japan. Tezuka served as the director for A Link to the Past and would reprise his role for this game. As the title started in this loose, experimental setting, early development followed that idea with the team testing new and unexplored ideas, as well as playing with the concept of using characters from other franchises. Early on, Tetsuke Tanabe, who previously wrote the A Link to the Past script, joined the team, who would later work with Yoshiaki Koizumi to write the game's story. Given instructions to omit certain series mainstays like Princess Zelda, the Triforce, and even Hyrule as a whole, Tanabe proposed that the game's setting be that of an island with a giant egg resting on top of a mountain. This core concept led to the plot we know today. Following the events of A Link to the Past, Link leaves Hyrule, setting sail to seek out the wisdom and training required to defend Hyrule against any future threats. Caught in a terrible storm, his raft is destroyed by a bolt of lightning. Washing ashore on a mysterious island, Link is awakened by a young woman named Marin. Not long after, he discovers his sword is missing. A strange owl also suddenly appears and tells him that in order to ever leave the island, he must awaken the windfish. This prophetic statement leads our hero on a quest to obtain several magical instruments to awaken the windfish from his slumber. To support the North American release of Link's Awakening, Nintendo sponsored a cross-country train competition called the Zelda Whistle Stop Tour. This event, which lasted 3 days, allowed select players to test Link's Awakening in a timed race to complete the game. Due to massive marketing campaigns, Link's Awakening was a massive success. In North America, it was the best-selling game in August of 1993. The title sold so well that it boosted Game Boy sales by 13% in 1993, making it one of Nintendo's most profitable years in North America up to that point. And remember, this game was released in the second half of the year. The game remained on the bestseller list for more than 90 months after release. Though it wasn't perfect, some critics complained about the limited control scheme that was massively reduced from its SNES counterpart and the monochrome graphics that made it difficult to discern the screen's contents. At least one of these concerns was addressed with the release of Link's Awakening DX or Deluxe as a part of the Game Boy Deluxe series. The Game Boy released in October and November in 1998 in Japan and North America respectively. Link's Awakening DX was released in December of the same year and in Europe in January of 1999. The DX version fixed various bugs, as well as including an extra color-based dungeon. They even included Game Boy camera functionality. The DX was also backwards compatible with the original Game Boy. 26 years after the release of the original game, Link's Awakening was released worldwide on September 20th of 2019 on the Nintendo Switch, remade from the ground up, featuring a fully 3D environment and a new diorama-like art style. This version finally resolved the complaints of the limited control scheme by no longer having to select the sword and shield as they are permanently equipped, though you still have to select other items from your inventory. To wrap up this segment, if you're looking to play Link's Awakening, the remake is available on the Switch as I mentioned, but you can also play Link's Awakening DX through the Nintendo Switch Online basic package. But if you want to play the original Game Boy game, Link's Awakening was included in a Zelda-themed Game & Watch console alongside Zelda 1 and 2 for the NES. I'm not going to advertise this through Twitter or any of the other social media platforms, so stick around to the end to hear how you can get one of those mini consoles from me. I will ship to anywhere in North America. Anyhow, I think that this is going to wrap up this history segment, but I do have some unique trivia notes. So what do you guys think? Should I mention these now or try to sprinkle them throughout our memories in other parts of the show?
Let me hear some fabulous trivia, Sean.
All right, I got some good ones here. In the Japanese version, the mermaid's missing item wasn't a necklace. It was actually her bikini top. But that was deemed too risque for North American audiences, and that was changed to a necklace.
I don't know if I'm surprised or just like it's not surprising that it was a bikini top in Japan.
Well, as I continue, there's some others that you're going to understand why these were changed later on. In the German version of the game, entering Link's name as Moyse will change the background music to a techno remix. The code refers to the famous German translator Claude Moyse. In the DX version of the game, the code will change the music to a remix of Totaka's song, and in the French version of the game, use the code or name Lolo, that is Lolo. And speaking of Claude, if you use the magic powder on a creature called the Buzz Blob, which are the green cucumber with legs looking like enemies,
yeah.
it turns into what's called a Kukumon, who says one of 4 messages on a loop when spoken to.
That was the first thing that I used it on. And I'm like, okay, this has to have some sort of significance. So what is it?
Well, the text is different in each language: English, Japanese, German, and French. In the original non-DX version, German translation, there are 2 text messages in particular that were quickly changed for the re-release. Those were, when translated, say, quote, "never without a condom," and, quote, "give me your juice, I'll give you mine, ...
Well, you heard it here first, kids. Wrap it up.
So there are just a couple other ones I wanted to mention. There was a limited edition release for the Switch remake called the Dreamer Edition, which included an art book and steelbook in the shape of a Game Boy Color. I don't know what region this was released in, but I did manage to get my hands on one, which is still sealed, but I spent a lot of money on it. And lastly, the shopkeeper in the game, you can actually steal from him. But if you do, when you get outside of the store, it will say, "way to go, you got something free, don't you feel good?" And everywhere you go, and everyone will speak and refer to you as thief. If you return to the shop to purchase any more items in an attempt to make amends with the shopkeeper, he will kill you.
How does he kill you? Like,
it's like this giant electric, like Palpatine style force lightning.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, he just immediately uses his old man magic and just kills you. So that's all I've got. Let's take another music break, and when we come back, we're going to discuss our memories of Link's Awakening. So Chris and Cory have never played this as a kid, so it's solely on my shoulders to talk to you about my memories. And unfortunately, my memories of Link's Awakening are very vague. I did own it, but I don't think I ever beat it. I do have these distinct memories of playing it on car rides and just getting so pissed off at the screen. And you guys know what I'm talking about. If you don't position the screen just right,
Oh yeah,
you weren't
those
gonna
old
see
like
anything.
crystal LED. Yeah, terrible, no backlighting.
Yeah, and if there was a glare, forget about it.
Or a cloud, or yeah, like took a corner and it changed the lighting. Yeah. You remember the stupid little lamps that came that plugged into it, and
the little
like
book lights.
The worm light.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I had one of those. It didn't always work. But
I had one of those on my Game Boy Color that wasn't backlit, and it's frustrating.
Oh yeah, for sure. But later on, once I finally had a Super Nintendo, I eventually got a Super Game Boy. And for those of you out there that may not be aware, it was a cartridge for the Super Nintendo that you could plug in a Game Boy cartridge and play it on your television with the SNES controller.
Oh,
and
nice.
Some games had color options that allowed you to change the color palette. And through that, I ended up playing the game a lot more. But again, I don't think I ever beat the game. I would venture to say it's harder than A Link to the Past because I beat that a ton of times as a kid. But I don't remember.
I mean, I can't chip in on my childhood memories, but I would say like one thing when I was playing, I'm like, there's no way I would have beat this as a kid.
Yeah, some of those dungeons are just so confusing.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
But as far as my memories are concerned, I mostly just have feelings. And to best describe that, it was just this constant state of confusion about the game. Like we're talking about, it's a pretty hard game, but at the same time, there was so much charm to it. And the premise of beating a link to the past and then being thrown into this strange new world really drew me in. And I loved the mystery of that giant egg and the visions that came to my mind when the owl would mention the windfish. Because I had no idea what that meant or what to think about. So, my young brain is just building all these crazy ideas about what it could be. And I remember thinking that it was more like a dragon than a whale. And it wasn't until much later on that I finally saw it. And I'm not going to say I was disappointed, but it definitely didn't fit what I had built in my brain. And I don't really know how exactly to describe I felt in, but man, I'm glad that I have these feelings of just being happy. And I've kind of always felt that way about the Zelda franchise because it's what made me a gamer. And I'm glad that this is part of the path that my life has taken. Sorry about that weird therapy session, guys. So
that's all good.
Even though I don't remember playing the game itself that much, I do remember the Nintendo Power that had a short walkthrough for I think the first 3 dungeons or so, but it's the cover that I remember the most because it had the owl and it has this sword, which looking back now, I think is supposed to be the Covalent sword because it can't be the Master Sword. You don't have that with you because you return that to the pedestal at the end of A Link to the Past.
But it's got your name on it. Not the Master Sword, the sword in this game.
But I'm talking about the cover. The cover.
Yeah, I know. I was making a joke to the game.
Oh, yeah.
Which, by the way, this game is full of stupid little jokes and inside jokes with itself.
Yeah, so. Like the kids, it's like, in order to save, you have to push A, B, select, start. I don't know what that means, though.
I'm just a kid.
Yeah, stuff like that.
And this must be your shield. It's got your name on it. And when you get the second sword, it says, do you want to put your name on it?
And that sword is necessary. And we'll discuss that more in our replay and everything. But yeah. I also had the strategy guide for this game that I did not have when I was younger. I got it when I was a little bit older. And I've always loved that strategy guide because it has a lot of artwork in a similar style that you saw in the original Legend of Zelda manual. Just that really unique drawing.
90s cartoon. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just, it's so good.
Nintendo animation. I some of the Mario stuff was animated in the same style. I don't know. Yeah. Reminds me of the Link, the Zelda cartoon.
That just triggers this nostalgia part of my brain that just wishes I could get something like that. But is there anything you guys want to add into this? Because this is going to be a very, very short section. But
well, then I will
our whole replay.
I will gladly tell you Gibson's childhood memory of this game.
Yeah.
So Gibbs watched me playing this on the Switch, and he saw me dragging around Chomp Chomp, and so that's why he wanted to play it. He just wanted to have his own Chomp Chomp to walk around with, and it was kind of the same situation as you, where I helped him get through the first dungeon, and then helped him get to the pig dude's hideout so he could free Chomp Chomp. And I helped him with the bosses a little bit, but I walked him through it, had him, you gotta go around here, you gotta go around here, go this way. And then once he got Chomp Chomp, he just spent the rest of the time just walking around with Chomp Chomp, feeding bad guys to the enemy, and he was completely fine with that. He didn't care about advancing the story. He didn't care about going to the next dungeons or anything. He was completely happy just exploring the little area that was unlocked to him. And then he stumbled across the fishing game and spent an hour, not all in the same session, but the next time, eventually when he stumbled across the fishing game, he spent like a good hour just trying to get the biggest fish in the pond, and that was all he needed to be happy. Like he didn't need to beat the game. He loved the artwork, he loved the music, and he was excited just to be walking around checking it out.
I didn't mention it in the history segment, but there was one of the developers that really pushed to have the fishing minigame added in. And I'm so glad he did, because that's been such a staple going forward in the franchise. Like, we talked about that in the Ocarina of Time episode about how much fun it is. There's no enemies, there's no danger to the world. All you're doing is just fishing. I think your son is really gonna remember this later in life.
Probably, yeah. I would think so too. And it's gonna be, and that's what your story kind of reminded me of his. Like, he's 7, and he's not a big video gamer, so he's not gonna beat this game. He's not gonna go and get lost in the 5th dungeon or anything like that. He's just gonna remember this bright, cheerful game, walk around with this on this cool little island, and he's just gonna have these vague memories of it that are just gonna be happy little memories.
That's awesome.
And that's all thanks to you, Sean. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome, man. So, Cory, do you have anything, or are we just moving on to the next segment?
Bomberman was really hard to play in a car while you were driving as well.
I never really played Bomberman when I was a kid.
Really, Bomberman was my jam, dude.
It wasn't until like I was a teenager and I got into emulation that I really started playing all that.
Speaking of Bomberman, I had never played any of the Bombermans, and then when I was in a band after high school, one of the dudes brought over his 64. And he's like, "Dude, we gotta play Bomberman." And this was like the same group of dudes that we used to do LAN parties with Halo and stuff. And Bomberman 64 with 4 players is amazing, especially like, you know, sharing the same room and sitting around.
Yeah,
with
dude,
each other.
Bomberman's a great title.
Such a great couch co-op, you know, on your friends kind of game. Oh, so fun.
Yeah, I had a lot of fun. It's been like, because I had it on the Game Boy, so I don't remember what version it was. He had like a Indiana Jones hat on it. I'm gonna try to look it up. Maybe it was a Game Boy Color.
But while you look this up, let's go ahead and take a break, and we're going to listen to some more music. And when we return, we're going to discuss replaying Link's Awakening today in 2023. So welcome back, everybody. I'm going to ask Chris to start us off because he played it in a really interesting way. So, Chris, why don't you tell the audience how you decided to play Link's Awakening?
So I was playing it on Game Boy Color, and then also Sean sent me a Switch copy. So I was trying to play both at the same time. Ideally, I was going to play it during the day, and then like play it at break time, play it mobile, Game Boy, and then whenever I had time at home, try to catch up on the Switch and try to do them side by side, and that worked out for about 2 dungeons, and then I ran out of time at home, but it was really neat being able to compare the 2 versions, and I started on the Game Boy Color, and everything that I didn't like about it, I noticed immediately was fixed on the Switch. The Game Boy Color is fantastic. It looks just like Link to the Past. It really is. And if you guys all remember during the Ocarina episode, I talked about, I'm like, oh yeah, you know, Game Boy, you know, mobile versions, you know, I don't consider those like full-fledged games. I take that back about this one because this is really a Link to the Past 2. It feels the same, the graphics are the same, the music is just as enchanting and whimsical and awesome. and the world is just as detailed, and the players are just as detailed. They did a fantastic job capturing that feel of Link to the Past and putting it on a Game Boy. And kudos to them, because they did a fantastic job with only having 2 buttons as well, with A and B. You mentioned in the history about people complaining about the control layout or whatever. It is frustrating, and I just had to keep reminding myself they had 2 buttons to play with. So, like, in order to have all the features that they have in the game and all the unlockables and all that stuff, that little inventory switch system, yeah, it's a little obnoxious, but you get used to it. And that was a very, in my opinion, a very genius way of being able to include all the items and power-ups that you get and be able to turn them on and off so you can use them in a specific situation, because they couldn't just make it so they were just on you at all times. So kudos to them.
And I really like how you can combine a lot of those items. So like you can combine the bow and the bombs, and you can have bomb arrows.
Yes, and I didn't hear about that until afterwards. So I never actually made any bomb arrows myself, but there were, like, before I even thought about needing this for anything, there was a time where I was like, I wonder what would happen if I use the running boots and the arrow and the feather at the same time, and you jump super far, and then it turns out, that's actually required further down into the game.
A very required part.
Yeah, but I was using that to like skip around. Like I'm sure there were parts. At least I like to tell myself I was clever enough to discover areas that I got too early using that combination that wasn't intended to. There's like, can't remember. There's this cave in the animal village, behind the animal village, that there's a piece of heart that you're supposed to get to, and I can't remember how.
Is it shaped like a
to get
skull?
to it. No, I don't think so. I can't remember what it was, but there was this piece of heart that was way off, out of reach, and then your pathway to get to it was around. You had to go through this narrow pathway and around a corner, but the floor was completely gone. And I was able to, after several attempts of running and jumping, I was able to run and jump and hug the wall and go around the corner all in the air. I'm like, there's no way that this was intended to be caught this way. Like, I'm sure I was supposed to like hook shot it later or something like that. I don't know. But no, anyways, like to really give my appreciation for how well they included all these different items and tools, and they only did it with 2 buttons. So good for them. No bumpers. And this was after A Link to the Past came out too, which means like A Link to the Past set the bar really high, and they were able to, meet that bar with, again, 2 buttons. That just still blows my mind.
So you said at the beginning that there were several things in the Game Boy version that were improved in the Switch version. Was it just that you were talking about?
Pretty much. I mean, and the controls are much smoother. Obviously, like, they just feel more natural. Your character moves around a lot better. You know how it is with Link to the Past and like the old games, like trying to hit people at a diagonal with your sword is weird. And I get to that point where I just like hold my sword out, like charge up a spin attack, and then wait for them to like come at me at an angle and then hit them. That's my way of hitting diagonally, is using a spin attack. But yeah, the big features though is being able to have your sword and shield at all times, and the fact that I can't remember, once you get the power bracelet, you can just pick stuff up. You don't have to equip a power bracelet to be able to pick up a rock. It just becomes part of you at that point. And for everybody that has not played this game who's listening, one of the pieces of equipment that you get right away in order to lift jars and rocks and stuff like that is this power bracelet, which gives you strength. But in order to actually use it in the Game Boy version, you have to unequip something. You have 2 equipment slots, and you get to choose whatever. You can throw whatever you want in there, but you have to unequip something in order to put on a bracelet so you can pick up this rock, chuck the rock, and then switch to something else Like I was constantly switching between the feathers, the boots, and the power bracelet on my B button while maintaining the sword on my A button, you know?
That was going to be one of my questions for both of you about which items did you basically, what did you keep up there?
For the most part, I think that the A button, wait, where is it? A, B, B, A. B, A. So my A button was constantly my sword or a weapon. And then the other button was whatever utility I needed for that area or the dungeon. Yeah. What about you?
Before I get into my replay, I'd like to hear from Cory because, Cory, you've been on vacation for a week, 2 weeks?
A week.
So I'm sure this isn't the only thing you did, but did you get through? And which version did you play?
I played the Switch version.
Isn't it gorgeous?
Yes,
And that is one
so-
thing I do want to say. Like, the Game Boy Color was cool and looks a lot like Link to the Past on Super Nintendo, but the Switch version is so pretty.
Yeah, so the first thing that you would notice playing this game is that it is a very, very like well done, attractive title, I would say. Um I had a lot of fun playing this one, and it does just look wonderful. It's what's the best way to describe it? It's kind of like this very bright palette. It's like this bubbles style animation, and everything is like super detailed and just fun and fanciful. And I just had a really good time with it. I think especially because some of the older, or not older, but some of the newer titles for Zelda are very, very complicated. Um, like you'll get so much more going on in even as early as like Wind Waker, but the newer titles, everything is just very. I don't know the best way to describe. There's just a lot more going on. Like there's crafting and all other kinds of stuff happening. This is just an old school version of Zelda,
Right.
where it's just like A and B, and you just run around this nice little open world, and you have kind of like a clear cut objective, and you just go about doing it. There's not a lot of like extra stuff going on.
Yeah, you're right. And as soon as you complete an objective, the owl shows up and immediately gives you something else to do.
Yeah, and it's just this nice thing to just have this kind of main goal and go about it. And like I said, like with Tears of the Kingdom and what's the other new one? I can't even remember the name of it now.
Breath of the Wild?
Yeah, Breath of the Wild. Like there's just so much more like happening in the open world, and there's just so many more little side quests and everything. They just feel much more like just really like RPGs, whereas this is just like a straightforward adventure game, and it's very just like wholesome and straightforward, and I just really enjoyed that about it. That plus like the color palette, and it doesn't really take itself seriously. We kind of talked about the whole
jokes.
thing. Yeah, like the whole thing where the kids will talk about like how to save, and they'll go, I don't know what that is, but that's how you do it. And there's like Goombas and stuff in this game, like the Shy Guys and stuff. It's crazy.
Oh my gosh! So Gibbs, when he was watching me play, he saw all the like I'd point out, I'm like, check it out, there's Goombas and there's piranha plants, and Gibson said, man, whoever made this game must have been a real big fan of Mario.
That is adorable.
I thought so too.
And the Yoshi doll that you see almost immediately.
Yes. Oh yeah, Gibbs saw that. He's like, is that Yoshi? I'm like, yeah. That was what started the whole Mario thing with him, because Gibbs loves Yoshi, and he's like, is that Yoshi? I'm like, yeah. He's like, is this a Mario game? I'm like, no, but I think it's just a joke. And then he saw the other stuff, and he's like, oh man, yeah, they must have been a real big fan of Mario. I was like, oh yeah, you have no idea, buddy.
Yeah, like running into the Shy Guys for the first time, I was just like, oh, okay, like this is the route we're going here. It's just very campy. It doesn't take itself seriously. It's very much a parody of Zelda in a way. And the fact that it's not the main business. It's like, oh, okay, yeah, Princess Zelda's not the main thing. Like you're not really worried about Ganon at the moment. So it was just nice to have one of those situations where I'm not in this whole like the Hero of Time business going on. It was just this kind of nice side tour.
Now, when you played it on Switch, did you play it on TV or did you play it handheld at all?
I played it handheld.
Okay, so awesome. That's one thing. I think I mentioned this to Sean because I started on handheld, and we talked about the art style and how it's got the. To me, it looks like you're looking into a shadow box, and I just thought that was so cool. And when I threw it on, and Sean was like, "Really?" Like because Sean, when I mentioned that, you were kind of you didn't see it, right?
I was kind of complaining about the blurry edges and stuff.
Right. And I was like, oh, I love that.
But having replayed it, I kind of realized that it adds this almost like dreamlike quality to the entire world that this game has. And everything is just kind of subtly weird in a way that's hard to explain. And I think that adds to it.
Well, and I thought instantly, when talking about the blurred edges, like when I was playing handheld, the blurred edges kind of focus your eyes towards the middle of the screen, and it kind of makes it feel 3D, like you were looking into a little 3D. It feels like my screen is like an inch deep, and I'm looking at these little models, and it makes everything kind of pop up from the screen more. And when I did eventually put it on the big screen, then like that magic kind of went away. I was like, oh yeah, okay. Now I see why Sean was complaining about the blurred edges, because on TV that little 3D shadow box feel does not translate onto the big screen. But it still looks amazing.
That is super interesting because I did not play it handheld whatsoever.
Try it just once. Just fire it up and see if you see what I see, because I don't know, maybe it's like a magic eye thing where, like if you like your eyes on focus or whatever. But to me, I just thought, like handheld, it looks even better handheld than it does on the TV. And it's definitely worth checking out.
So what were some of the other aspects that you enjoyed, Cory?
I just, like I said, it's just such a campy, fun feeling, and the controls were very smooth, and everything was just very straightforward and wonderful, and almost wholesome in a way. Like there's really nothing too shocking or outside the box with this. It's just a nice, straightforward title. And I especially just like, going on the little dungeon crawls and, oh God, what's the zone? It's like one of the water areas, and I can't remember now. I'll have to get back to you on that one. But it was just such a nice time. I really enjoyed it.
So as far as like the water levels, I think it's called the Angler's Tunnel. Or maybe the Catfish's Maw.
It's the Catfish's Maw. Like that was just such a fun little area.
Oh, and one thing I would like to throw out there is the fact that there are so many things from this game that pop up in future Zelda games, like things that from this game that became staples for the franchise. Kind of like you said, like the fishing thing. Like I would not have expected, because like this game was so jokey and everything, and Link to the Past wasn't jokey at all. Like that was to me that felt like a very serious, immersive game, whereas this, like right away, it kind of cheapens itself because they are making jokes about themselves, and and the whole I don't know, I get the impression they didn't take this game as seriously as they did the other ones, but yet it's made a lot of.
That's part of the charm of it, though.
Exactly. No, yeah, super charming, but also it kind of made me discount the game for a little bit. But then as I was going on, and I found the fishing hole, I'm like, oh, this pops up in every Zelda game after this, and the item shops and like the item game shops, those pop up in every Zelda game after this, and I'm like, oh, okay. So like this actually kind of this isn't just a game to be played and forgotten. Like this is a full-fledged Zelda game. Further in the episode, I do want to ask you, Sean, how does this game affect the timeline of Zelda? Because I'm confused about.
Well, it's after Link to the Past.
Right. This is this takes place 2 months after Link to the Past. But can we give the big spoiler?
Where it's all a dream.
Yeah, it's all a dream.
Yeah.
So it doesn't actually affect the timeline at all. So it
it's just a portion of Link's story, and like I said, it doesn't involve Zelda for a change. It's just it's the adventures of Link. Yeah.
Yeah. And
I think Wind Waker is really one of the only other times I can think of that.
Oh, I was going to say, because when I was playing this, I think I read somewhere that this was the only game that wasn't in Hyrule. Is Wind Waker in Hyrule?
Wind Waker does have Hyrule, but it's beneath the ocean.
Okay.
Majora's Mask doesn't have Hyrule at all because that's set that's set in Termina, which is like this whole nother world. And as far as like the Zelda timeline goes, because we talked about this a little bit in the Ocarina, episode, it goes like Link's Awakening and then the original Legend of Zelda is right after that. Well, not right after. There's like timeline in between, but as far as like how they break down the quote unquote official Zelda timeline, it would go like a Link to the Past, Oracle of Ages / Oracle of Seasons, then Link's Awakening, then the original Legend of Zelda, then Zelda 2 Adventure of Link.
And one thing I was just
go ahead.
Just in this, I mean, since this thing was all a dream and everything, like, did it have to be included in any timelines at all? Like, because this game doesn't actually affect.
Well, but so it's a dreamscape, right? But it's still occurring to Link. Like, he ends up like in a shipwreck or whatever, and then
that's true. I mean,
it's like wrapped up in this dreamland. But like the dragon's real, right? Like the dragon and Link both wake up at the end of it.
It's not a dragon. It's a
windfish,
whale.
Whatever.
Yeah. So there's some things that I kind of want to talk about here because like I feel like I was getting whiplash playing this game because it does have this like kind of surreal feeling to it where they're not taking themselves very seriously.
Mm-hmm.
But then you also have the owl constantly reminding you like you have to do this. The only way to get out is to wake up the windfish. And you have they're nightmares of the windfish, but they
are pleading for you not to wake up the windfish because they don't want to be erased from an existence. I'm like, yes. And once it gets in, it kind of like, I'm like, damn it. I thought maybe this was going to be the Zelda game that didn't get dark. And no, it does. Like,
it gets dark as hell because it's like you're going to erase everything. And that's when you realize that, yeah, you're going to be getting rid of the nightmares, but you're also getting rid of
your girlfriend.
Like them dream kids gotta go, man. I don't know what to tell you.
You're getting rid of Maybe Village, which is obviously a play. Does it exist? Maybe. But there's, the Animal Village, and there's all these other characters like that weird crocodile or alligator that wants bananas, I think.
Yeah.
I can't remember the whole trade sequence, but you run into all these characters that you kind of bond with and make these attachments with, and you kind of come to the realization that in order to leave, you have to erase them from existence. You're not even killing them. You were completely erasing them,
making them never exist. Yes. And it's like, I was like, man, and that was one thing I messaged out to you. I was like, the owl is the only one pushing you to do this. Everybody else is like, it's making me feel like the bad guy and making me feel like the owl's the bad guy. Like,
but the owl is the windfish. So like he's trapped in his own consciousness. So you're really helping him out.
Wait, no, the owl was the guardian of the windfish, wasn't it?
He's like his consciousness.
Yeah, basically.
I always thought the owl was real, but I never thought about the owl being a part of the windfish's subconscious.
Yeah, it's like
driving.
subconscious. Yes.
Oh man.
Yeah, man.
Okay.
Oh,
The owl is like pleading with you. He's like, man, wake me up. Like, but he doesn't say that. He's like, you got to get this windfish up. But he's like, really, like, I'm trapped in my own nightmare, like hellscape. You got to get me out of here, bro.
Oh, and two more things, like how I mentioned about how this game sets, recurring themes for other Zelda games. The owl, who you see in Ocarina of Time, and then also the trading sequence. So, anyways.
Not only that, but it also plays back to characters that you saw previously in A Link to the Past, like Kiki the monkey, who in A Link to the Past, you have to give Kiki 10 rupees to follow you, and then another 100 rupees to open up the Palace of Darkness.
Right.
That's whatever.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
And there's also the magic bat.
Yeah. That's
that
true.
makes no sense for a return. I mean, like, if you're going to pick any character in the return, you pick Kiki the monkey and the magic bat. But they did.
Who's to say these creatures are not returning because Link's subconscious is mixing with the windfish in this dreamland?
Oh man, we're getting pretty meta here. This is, my mind is just being blown here. But we haven't even talked about the very beginning of the game. We haven't even talked about the very, very beginning, that opening cutscene and that short animation. Even on the Switch, it gave me the same feeling that the Game Boy version did all those years ago. And so, Chris, I know you played Smash Brothers Ultimate, but have you, Cory?
I don't know. I've played one of them on the Switch. I don't know which one I own.
So I am big into Smash Brothers. So when it came to like new character reveals and everything, like I was in it. I was there day one for each of those reveals. And if you've never seen it before, one of the Smash Brothers Ultimate reveals was of Lady Palutena. And she is like the goddess that looks over
Pit, right?
Yep, from Kid Icarus. And there's this short video of Link fighting against Pit. And it was this beautiful anime, it's so good. This fight sequence is so good. Google it. Like, it is fantastic. It's on YouTube. And I got the same thoughts, like seeing this little cutscene of Link struggling against the ocean and just his raft being destroyed by the lightning. It was just amazing to see. And I just want a high quality Zelda anime out there. But even there, I'm not really talking about the game. So the game.
Hang on. One other thing about Smash Brothers. You could pick your little player icon. And before I even knew what the windfish was, I picked the windfish because I'm like, oh, that's a sweet looking whale. But so yeah, my Smash Brothers icon for multiplayer is the windfish, and I didn't even know what it was. But when we started this game, I was like, oh, that's where it came from.
I never even thought of that because I think that's mine too.
And mine is the Game Boy Color, like pixelated version of the windfish, and it's just the windfish looks so cool. That can be our matching tattoo.
We could do it. Oh,
no fish tattoo.
So you know what? I was going to talk about the game, but I'm going to twist this around and say, actually, I'm going to ask you a question. Have either of you ever played Super Mario Land 2, the 6 golden coins for the original Game Boy?
No.
I think briefly. I think I borrowed it as a kid. Never actually.
So Super Mario Land 1 sucks. It's terrible. It's only like 25 minutes long, and it is not good. It doesn't even feel like a Mario game. But Super Mario Land 2, the 6 golden coins, is outstanding. It is amazing how good that game is. And I feel that while these developers had to deal with the constraints of the Game Boy, it was also a way for them to experiment. And I bring up Super Mario Land 2 because there's a ton of weird enemies in that game, and there's weird power-ups, and there's even a weird story. Like, Mario has his own castle, and it's been taken over by a mysterious stranger named Wario. And that's the first time you meet him.
Oh, right.
And there's enemies. They're not even Shy Guys. They're wearing Jason Voorhees masks with like knives sticking out of them. I think in the Pumpkin Zone. I'm pretty sure that is. But the point I'm trying to make is that the Game Boy really feels like it was Nintendo's way of experimenting with their mainline franchises to add all this weird stuff that they really couldn't do on what they thought were going to be like the multi-million sale.
Right.
I think
Yeah.
that's because it's like less high profile.
I think so. Yeah. And that kind of goes along with what I was saying, like how like I didn't think this game was going to be like a serious Zelda game because it did start off so jokey, but then it really took they used a lot of stuff from this game and threw it in, and it became Zelda staples. And same with Wario. I mean, like now he's a main franchise character.
Yeah, he is 100% a part of the Mario franchise, Mario universe, but he was just some weird guy that took over Mario's castle. But I want to talk about the game itself. And this game can be very, very difficult if you don't have a clue about how Zelda games play. And I say that because, like, if you played a lot of Zelda games, you can kind of anticipate how puzzles will work out because they kind of use the same basic formula.
In this one, I was trying not to use a guide. I was like, okay, I want to figure out the puzzles, the dungeon puzzles without any guide. And I think it was like on the fourth one where I was like, I'm stuck. I'm legit stuck. I would have had no idea. And I can't remember what mechanism it was that got me stuck. But yeah, I ended up like these puzzles are tough.
Well, fortunately, in chess, you can locate an item that is an owl's beak in the Switch version. In the Game Boy version, in the original Game Boy version, I think it's just an item that you plug into these stone reliefs, and it will give you a hint about what to do or how to do things.
On the color, it was stone beak, an owl beak.
It was?
Okay. Well, at least on the color. I don't know about the original.
I think the original, it's just some item. But if you find these beaks, you can put them in this relief of an owl, and the owl will give you a hint about what to do in the level, but it doesn't always help that much.
No, and sometimes there's a couple of times where the hint that he gives you is something that you've already figured out by the time you got to him. Like,
yeah, and if I remember correctly, in the Game Boy, well, this is the same on the Switch version as well, but there's one dungeon where you have to defeat some enemies in a very specific order to progress.
Yes, and it's kind of cryptic about it too. It's like, wasn't it like, you must defeat the hood before the hare, and like,
yeah.
And I was like, I'm like, what are they talking about? And when I got to that room, it didn't even click to me like, oh, this is the clue he was talking about.
Yeah, so I knew ahead of time what to do, but as a child, obviously I didn't. And someone playing this for the first time is going to be like, what are you talking about? Because if you look up like the enemy names and everything, that hare that you're talking about is called a Pole's voice.
Yes.
And that makes no damn sense.
Dude, none of these names ever make sense. You're always telling me the names of stuff on this show, and I'm like, you made that up. And you're like, it's in the guide. I'm like, that guide is lying to you. You're always like, this guy's name is Slappy Harry. And I'm like, there's no way. And then you're like, here's the 1987 manual for Tetris. And I'm like, oh, long boy. Okay, that's absurd.
Did you know each of the square of the configurations?
I'm aware that
they each
have names. Yes.
I was kidding. Do they really?
No, I think that's a myth. I think that's a meme that someone made. But anyways, like, yeah, these enemy names, like a bat is not a bat. It's a keys. A snake is a rope.
Yeah, the ropes. You have to defeat the ropes. It's like,
and we already talked about the buzz blob.
That one actually makes sense.
I guess. I mean, it's a weird cucumber looking.
And when you hit it, it zaps you. Hence the buzz, and it's a blob.
I suppose. But the game can be very cryptic at times, so I don't think it's an issue to use a manual for this game. And that was going to be something I brought up later, but we're already talking about it now. I think there's nothing wrong with using a manual anyway, but especially for this game, and especially for the Game Boy version, the Switch version I think is a lot easier than the Game Boy was.
I would agree with that. The and I'm going to sound like a mean saying this. The fact that I was able to walk Gibson through the first dungeon, like hands off, but just like describing to him what he needs to do, and he was able to manage the controllers and get it done, is proof alone that the Switch version is easier.
And you know what? There's some obnoxious stuff in the Game Boy version. Like if you accidentally hit one of those acorns, your day is ruined because the game stops. You get another pop-up window.
Yes. And your sword power up. There'd be times where I don't care if my sword's more powerful enough. I don't want the freaking pop up anymore. And every time the compass, and there's a new feature in this. Every time you enter a room, if there's a hidden key, there's a chime. Okay, it's a new feature the first time. It's this exact same feature that 8 times after it. Like,
and what blows my mind is that they didn't learn their lesson for subsequent Zelda titles, because one of the biggest complaints in the Twilight Princess is that they did that. Like every time you open up a chest and like it's a green rupee, they tell you like, oh, hey, you found a green rupee. Or maybe it was Skyward Sword. It was one of those two that did that, and it was awful, and I hated it. So whenever I play the Game Boy version of this game, I will do everything in my power not to touch the acorn and the other power-up because it's just so awful. But some good stuff here is the music in this game.
Mm-hmm. And I liked how it's Zelda, so of course there is the repeating that main theme, but all the new stuff is fantastic. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think my favorite music in the entire game has got to be Ballad of the Windfish, which we're going to play when we transition to our final thoughts. But outside of that, it's the Face Shrine, that music. Man, it is so, so good. Yeah, the Face Shrine the music is just outstanding. Towards the end, that final dungeon, the Windfish's egg, the nightmare bosses, I felt were I thought they were very underwhelming.
Yeah, I did too.
You get like a Shadow Man boss rush. It's just, I mean, it was fine.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, can we talk about bosses?
Yeah, of course.
At this point, I assume we're not going to go dungeon by dungeon and talk about everything. But there's one of the bosses, or it might have been a mini boss, to be honest, was the I have no idea what the name of it was, but it was the creature that has the ball that throws the ball at you, and you have to use your super power bracelet to pick the ball up and then throw it back at the thing.
Yeah,
you guys know what I'm talking about.
Yep,
that was my favorite because in a sad way, it totally reminded me of playing fetch with a dog, and then unfortunately you have to kill the dog. But it was kind of cute. Like I did not want to kill this thing because it was kind of a cute boss. I
think my favorite boss was the genie in the lamp. If you can call the genie.
Yeah, the genie in the bottle. Yeah, and he basically spells out, at least in the Game Boy version, he spells out exactly what you have to do to kill him.
Yeah. Did either of you get the secret ending?
What secret ending? That it's not a dream?
I did not know.
It's all still the Windfish's dream, but in order to get the game's secret ending, you had to complete the game without any deaths. And after the end, instead of getting a fade to black, you see Marin as she appears on the screen. I think she winks at you or smiles or something like that. And then a single seagull will fly off into the distance.
So she's a seagull?
I think
is a seagull.
I think that's what the implication is. So guys, do you want to wrap this up?
All these people were consciousnesses trapped by the Windfish.
Can we also talk about really quick the speaking of other bosses I felt bad killing was when you get the ocarina. Oh yeah, that's another repeating item. But you get the ocarina that brings things to life. You bring this giant stone turtle back to life just to kill it. Like how cruel is that?
And to learn the song, you had to go see Wart from Super Mario Brothers 2.
Yes.
which is another dream game.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole world in Super Mario Brothers 2 is called Subcon. I mean,
That's Stone Turtle Fight.
A little on the nose.
Yeah. What were you saying, Cory?
I said that Stone Turtle Fight was really cool, though. You talking about like the dragon turtle, like in the desert with the big snake body?
Maybe.
You got like the long neck, and he's swinging around, and like you hit him. And
I can't remember. I killed him. Like he died. He was just the dungeon entrance guardian. Well, you had to like chop his head off in order to get into the dungeon.
Yeah, it was cool.
Yeah.
Well, guys, let's move on and take a break, and we're going to come back with our final thoughts about how you should play Link's Awakening today.
All right, and we're back. So I am starting off this final segment. We're talking about final thoughts here. It's a really lovely game, and I think the Switch is probably the best way to play it. Not only has it been cleaned up and modernized, but the art style is just really beautiful. It's just very fluid and fun and smooth, and it's a very well put together game, and I think it's really, really good. I think if you're gonna play a Zelda game, this is probably one of the like best entry level type of things. Like I said, there's not a lot going on in terms of like side quests and stuff, so it feels very much like the old school like Zelda adventure series, and I really enjoyed that about this.
I think this is the last of those games. This is the end.
I mean,
end of an era.
Other than the other like Game Boy style ones, like I mean, yeah, this is probably the latest release, but you want to talk about like titles that came after the Game Boy, like the Minish Cap and those sorts of things.
Yeah, but no, I'm just saying as far as like the simple gameplay, the not having crafting or not having
Yeah, this is just it's one of
this is the last one.
Yeah, it's very stripped down and very fun, and just the bosses are a lot of fun. There's a lot of variety, and there are like 8 little dungeons and everything, and it was just a really good time.
I definitely agree with you there, and when I play this in the future, I'm definitely going to be playing on the Switch. And this isn't a game that I replay very often. It's usually every few years or so, but I found myself asking why I don't play this more often, because the game is great. And it's kind of like, I think I mentioned this before, but it's kind of like comfort food to me.
Mm-hmm.
And when I do play this, it just kind of activates some part of my brain with its aesthetic and charm that it just makes me genuinely happy. And I feel good playing it, despite some of the more morbid undertones that we discussed. And I think I'm going to start making this a tradition where I play it maybe every autumn, because there's just something about this game that just keeps me coming back to it. And that's not going to change. And so many games in the Zelda franchise are moving and captivating, and this is definitely one of them. I highly recommend this game to anybody, especially if you have a Switch. And if you don't, try to track down that Game Boy title on some other platform. It's rougher for sure and a little more difficult, but for either of these two platforms, just use a guide. Who cares? Enjoy the game however you can. Enjoy your time with it. And if that means using a guide to get past a difficult section, just do it. Who cares?
I would like to add an amendment as well. This is not an incredibly long game either. I mean, casual play, like 10, 15 hours maybe. Somewhere in that range. Like a lot of the newer Zelda games, there's 60 hours or whatever, like RPG style elements. Like this is just a nice little aperitif. Basically, it's very short and fun and enjoyable.
Oh, even compared to Link to the Past, it's like the map's a quarter of the size. Well, and Link to the Past has basically 2 maps, but this map takes up like would fit into the bottom left corner of A Link to the Past, and it's very quick. And they even have nice little warp things in it too to help.
But what I will say about the map is that the world is very dense.
Yes,
Even though
yes.
it's not
Every
big.
Every
There's a
square
lot.
gets used. Yeah. And I should say every square, like in the Game Boy version, one thing I noticed the differences between the Game Boy and the Switch is that the Game Boy version, the map is cubed up. Everything like A1, A2, A3, very much Battleship style. And when you move from one screen, it's like Link to the Past. You hit the corner of the screen and then it has to shift over. Whereas
it's grid based.
Yeah. Whereas
gotta
on the
get
Switch,
that modern technology, baby, seamless.
exactly, on the Switch, it's seamless. It's so smooth. You can just run all day long until you run into a tree or something. It's that is one also
I would
huge
also
benefit
like
of playing
to
on
say
Switch.
that the water textures are flipping gorgeous too. So,
Dude, I don't have tons of games on the Switch, but I would say it's probably one of the most beautiful titles on the Switch.
Well, Chris, what are your thoughts about the game? Is this something that you're going to continue to play?
Oh, for
Is it
sure.
something that you're going to try to get Gibbs to finish?
Oh, maybe when he's older. It is definitely my favorite Zelda title is A Link to the Past. So I felt like I wish I would play this a long time because it feels like a Link to the Past, like a Link to the Past mod or something, tropical mod, and it's such a great game. It is a short game. It's like I said, it's also kind of like the end of the era where you don't have to worry about crafting stuff. You don't have to worry about. You just go through it. It is a Link to the Past Part 2. It really is, and I really enjoyed it on the Game Boy Color. I'm still currently enjoying it on the Game Boy. I mean, on the Switch. And I've got a buddy at work who saw me playing it. He's like, oh, I remember playing that when I was a kid. And I'm like, oh man, have you ever played it on Switch? He's like, no, I want to. That might be one of the next games I pick up. I'm like, dude, I'll let you borrow it. Like, you're gonna love it.
That's awesome.
I honestly, I can't tell you which way is a better way to play it. Like, if you love retro, pixelated, blocky looking, Link Zelda, play it on the Game Boy Color. It is fantastic. It holds up. The control thing, like I said, you get used to it real quick. If you want a gorgeous Switch game that is very beautiful but also very just fun and enjoyable, play it on the Switch. Like I think both versions have their strengths and not a lot of weaknesses, and you will enjoy it on either system.
Well said. So I think that's going to wrap up this episode, everybody. Looking forward, this month and next month are going to be absolutely insane for me. So I don't think we're going to be able to fit in 2 games. So instead, we're going to be, and when I say we, it's going to be me, I'm only going to be focusing on one game. And that game is going to be Medieval for the original PlayStation. But Chris and Cory have talked about...
snap.
Chris and Cory have talked about maybe doing another game on their own, which would be awesome. I
play Castlevania and flip out again.
Man, if you guys, I cannot wait. I would love for you guys to do an episode like that and just hear it. Like even if I'm doing all the editing, I would still love to do that, man, because it would just be so good to kind of be a spectator for one of these episodes for once. Oh yeah, the giveaway. So I have one of those Zelda Game & Watch handheld consoles. It's brand new, sealed in box. If you want it, email me at superannuatedstarman@gmail.com. Okay, again, that's superannuatedstarman@gmail.com. If you can't figure out how to spell it, you suck because it's our logo. It's right there. There's no questions about it. superannuatedstarman@gmail.com. Tell me what you liked or disliked about this episode. Give us suggestions about future games, and I will randomly select a winner from everybody that emails me. And what do you guys think?
And tell us what your favorite Bomberman is.
Your favorite Bomberman. What do you guys think? How long should I leave this open for people to email into?
Until we release the next episode.
Oh yeah, who knows when that's going to be. All right, so we don't know.
3 weeks.
Okay, so you're looking at around 3 weeks-ish. So go ahead and email me. And I mentioned in the last episode, but our show is now officially 2 years old. Chris and Cory, guys, I cannot thank you enough for your support and dedication to the show. You've been awesome. And everybody out there, thank you for your continued support, because I love having the excuse to play these old games.
Same here.
And it's awesome to sit around and talk about them. And even the episodes that weren't so fun, like that Jurassic Park episode, man, Chris, I'm still...
I will never forgive you for that,
I
Chris.
still hold a grudge to that.
I am still glad that we played it. They can't all be winners.
That game was just an hour-long episode of us yelling about it.
But it was so nostalgic and cool. And I'm glad that we played it. It was a stinker of a game, but I'm glad that we did it.
Even sitting around and yelling at each other about it, it was still a ton of fun. And this is something that I hope we continue doing for a long, long time. So until then, everyone, we've been Superannuated Starman.